Okay, this is going to be a video tutorial on what we call animation events. Animation events is a type of detector. It works a little bit like a clickable or a region sensor. Only what we're doing is we're making the actual detector an animation that's happening to trigger something else. Now, what I basically wanted to do in my setup here was take my blue cylinder, is going to rise almost 9 feet in the air. When it gets about halfway there, it's going to trigger the green door that I put in, that beautiful chartreuse there, to swing open. Now I probably could have done this just by, timing the animation of the door and of course the cylinder, but I didn't want it to work that way. I wanted to make it to where you actually had to stand in place long enough and the cylinder had to reach a certain point in order to trigger something. And so what we're going to do is use an animated event here. The door itself there's nothing really spectacular about it. It's just a simple object with page information and of course the animation on it. And as far as how to do animations, that's covered in another tutorial on basic animations. But that's all I had to put on it. Now I did have to add something to the cylinder, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. So let's select the cylinder. Okay, so we click on Graphic Editors, Dope Sheet, and as you can see, we'll get it within the video here, my Dope Sheet box has popped up. I'm going to scroll down to the cylinder. Right now, before I had to put in my note track, and I had to put my start and my ending marker, which is over here. However, I wanted to have an event happen halfway at about frame 150. So I added another key right here at frame 150. Only I called it something special. I called it CYL event, and of course at marker. If you put any other extra markers besides start and end, you end it with marker. Unless you're doing a loop or something else special. But in this case, I just needed a marker. Now, CYL event, the name, is different from my starting and beginning markers. Those were called CYL move. And the important reason for this is because if I don't give the actual marker event a name, a unique name, it will not show up in the animation event detector. And I'll show you that in just a second. So let's go ahead and close out our dope sheet because we're done here after putting in our marker. And we're going to call up the component manager. So we come down, I'm going to hit my C key because I made it a hotkey when I'm in the 3D window, that is. Call up the component manager. There it is. Now to create an animation event detector, you click on New, Detector, Animation Event. You click on that, and as you can see, it's actually made an animation event. Then you can assign it to a component. What component you assign it to doesn't matter. I mean, I could assign it to the cylinder, the door, the ground, put in a dummy, as long as it's attached to a component that is going to be exported. That's all that matters. In my case, I attached it to one of my region sensors over here. Now let's take a look at the rollout for it. Okay, so come over here to the component utils, click on the actual component animation event. This is the actual detector like it would be for a region sensor or a clickable. When you first call this up, the buttons here will default to none. You have to pick what animation the animation event is going to be on, which of course is my cylinder rising. And it's just like any other time you have to click on an animation. It wants to know the name of the animation, and when you click on this button, it wants to know, the object that's animating. In this case, it's the cylinder. When you've done that, down here in this box, which was empty, you'll have all your markers that you put in pop up. However, and this is why it was important to put in a unique name for that single marker. If I had called it the same thing as my starting and ending marker, it would not be here. All I would see is begin and end, and we don't want that. So that's why it's important to use a unique name. You go to your marker and you click on it to highlight it. Now you can highlight more than one marker, but we don't want that to happen. We want it to trigger at one point and one point only. And in this particular case, it's the cylinder event marker that I put on there. So now we've put in the trigger. That is what's going to cause a trigger. Now we need to use the trigger. So I added another logic responder, and on this, let me go ahead and remove this so you can see it. The detector for this responder, when I click on add, is going to call up another box. Okay, so when we select on the add for the detector, it'll call up our select nodes box. And as you can see, it's these two things here: the start trigger cylinder, exit trigger cylinder. Those are my two sensor regions. But we have a third option here. It's the animation event trigger. Okay, so we're going to make that our detector for our responder. So I click on it and then click on OK. Okay, so now we go back over, of course, to the responder, and you can see that in my detectors, the animation event is the detector. So when the cylinder rises up and it hits that marker, it's going to be the trigger, and this responder will detect that. And this is what I've told it to do. I said to set the animation forward for the door and to play that animation. So basically, in a nutshell, when we step on our plate and make the cylinder start to rise, the cylinder will animate, and when it gets to about the halfway point, the door should swing open. So how about we go ahead and export this, and we'll link into the game and check it out. Okay, for this video, for the tutorial, is to show you how animation events work. If you follow the tutorial, you'll know that when we step on this plate, the cylinder is going to rise. And what I wanted to have happen is that when the cylinder gets about halfway, this door over here is going to open up. So here we go. And as you can see, the door opened, and you would have to run and get through the door. So this is a good example of how